Pornhub is Jeffrey Epstein times 1,000.
Could you please give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Pornhub had done an amazing job at spending millions of dollars making itself this household, mainstream brand name for porn where people were wearing their apparel in public. You know, we're walking New York Fashion Week and there was faux commercials on Saturday Night Live. The site makes most of its money by selling 4.6 billion ad impressions on Pornhub every single day. So they call it the underage guessing game, where they're just playing Russian roulette with people's lives. They're trying to guess who's 16 and who's 18, what's rough sex and what's rape. The solution at scale to this problem is age and consent verification for every single person in every video.
Well, duh.
Yeah, like duh, right? Like how is that not already the standard? And it's not just a free-for-all on the side of uploading. They're not verifying the ages of those who are accessing the free porn sites either. Kids are being exploited in front of the screen and they're being exploited in back of the screen.
Laila Mickelwait, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me. So glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. This is a horrifying topic, but we should get into it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. First off, can you give a brief background about who you are and how you got into what you do?
Of course. Yeah, I am, the founder and CEO of the Justice Defense Fund, founder of the TraffickingHub movement. TraffickingHub movement to shut down Pornhub and hold its executives responsible for globally distributing and profiting from rape, child sexual abuse, trafficking, all forms of non-consensual content. And I've been in the fight against trafficking now almost 20 years. So it's about 18 years now. And in the context of that, I, a number of years ago, started to realize that trafficking wasn't just happening offline, back alleys and streets and things like that, but actually it was being filmed and it was being distributed online. We live in a digital age and that's what was happening. And so I began to investigate the intersection between what I call the big porn industry. Just like there's big tobacco and big pharma, there's a big porn industry. It's dominated primarily by one company, the parent company of Pornhub. But I began to investigate this intersection between child sexual abuse, trafficking, and the big porn industry. And I made a discovery one night, early 2020, middle of the night, unexpected moment that kind of just changed the course of my life. Over the last 5 years, it launched the TraffickingHub global movement, and so much has happened since then. What happened was at the end of 2019, it was a few days after my son was born. It was about 9 days after he was born. I read a story. I was paying attention to the headlines and I read a story about a 15-year-old girl from Broward County, Florida, who had been missing for an entire year. And she was finally found when her distraught mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site. And
my gosh.
Yes. And she was found in 58 videos being raped for profit. And police actually matched with an account named Daddy Slut. And police had matched the rapist's face from the videos to surveillance footage from a 7-Eleven, and they rescued the girl. She had been impregnated. And it was just like a horror story. And I just couldn't get that story out of my mind. And then at the same time, the London Sunday Times released an investigation, and they had found dozens of illegal videos on the site within minutes, even children as young as 3 years old. And it wasn't just children that were ending up in the headlines around this same time. There was 100 victims, adult victims of trafficking that were being trafficked by this operation in San Diego. And they had a partner channel on Pornhub. They had, over 800,000 subscribers, over 600 million views on these women's trafficking on Pornhub on a channel called Girls Do Porn. And the abuser that was running the operation, he was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. And, so it wasn't just children who were being abused, it was adults. And one last horrifying story I remember at the same time that was just coming back to me again and again was this woman called Nicole Audimondo from New York. And she was the mother of 2 young children. And she was being raped and abused by her partner, sexually tortured by her partner, who was then filming the videos and uploading them to Pornhub. And she killed him in self-defense. And then she got sentenced, though, to life in prison.
Gosh.
Life in prison, separated from her 2 young kids. Thankfully, she had an amazing legal team, and she got that reduced down to 7 years. And
that's still insane.
But it was like heartbreaking. And so all of these stories were just haunting me. And I had this question, how in the world did this abuse end up on Pornhub? And I decided to test the upload system one night in the middle of the night. And I found out what millions of people already knew, because millions of people were uploading to Pornhub every year. And that was that all they were requiring to upload was an email address. So that anybody anonymously in under 10 minutes, anywhere in the world, this is the YouTube of porn. At the time they had 56 million pieces of content on the site. They had, in 2020, 170 million visits to the site per year, 62 billion visits to this, 170 million visits per day, 62 billion visits that year, and enough content uploaded that year in 12 months that it would take 169 years if you put those videos back to back to watch that content. So this was a massive site. They had more visits than Netflix and Amazon.
Wow.
They were huge. And they had this dirty secret hiding in plain sight that they had no verification of ID to make sure that these weren't children in the videos being uploaded, no consent form to make sure that these weren't rape or trafficking victims. And putting those dots together quickly, I understood, okay, this site is actually infested with videos of real sexual crime, which it was. It was totally infested with sexual crime. And that Pornhub wasn't a porn site. It was actually a crime scene. And I said, I have to sound the alarm on this, what's going on this site. And that's how this story began. This is how the Trafficking Hub movement to take down Pornhub started 5 years ago.
That's insane. If you guys aren't on Peterson Academy, you're missing out. There are over 25 8-hour courses on there from people like Vervaeke, Michael Malice, Keith Campbell. My dad has 3 8-hour courses out now, including Nietzsche, Sermon on the Mount, and Intro to Personality, which is excellent. Brian Keating's on there. David Eagleman on brain plasticity just came out, which I love. Go to petersonacademy.com and come in and see what it's like. We have a 7-day money-back guarantee, so you can poke around the website, look at the courses, and get a refund if you want, no strings attached. Any age is welcome. The courses are university level. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of the podcast. I remember as a teenager, like not being on Pornhub or anything, but I remember hearing it thrown around and things, but I never knew that any of that wasn't just like adult porn stars being paid to perform and then uploading. Like that's what I assumed that site was.
That's what everybody assumed. I mean, because Pornhub had done an amazing job at spending millions of dollars making itself kind of this household mainstream brand name for porn, where people were wearing their apparel in public, and they were walking New York Fashion Week, and there was faux commercials on Saturday Night Live about Pornhub, and joke, wink wink, it was this like kind of cheeky household name brand for porn. And they even had an arm of Pornhub called Pornhub Cares. So it was like their philanthropic arm, and they would do these
so gross,
crazy PR stunts that they would save the whales and save the bees and donate to breast cancer research and save the pandas and all of this stuff that they would do to kind of present this facade to the world that they cared about health and safety, that they were a safe brand. And the key word that you just said was assume. And like, that's what I did. That's what everybody did. And my dad was a really wise man. And he often said, assumption is the mother of all screw ups. And that's exactly what everybody was doing. And then like all it took was testing the upload system. And I took a video of my keyboard and the rug in the dark room, and I uploaded it. And with a VPN, people could even anonymously do this. So you could just create any random email address, and then you could upload the content. It would go live on the site. And this is literally anybody could become a pornographer. With anyone with an iPhone, anyone with a camera, anywhere in the world, like in the back of a car, in a park, in a hotel room, anywhere could upload a video. And so much of it was actual sexual crime, all the way from child rape to non-consensual content. We call it image-based sexual abuse, revenge porn, that kind of content, even stolen content. So, porn performers themselves hated Pornhub because they would allow stolen, copyrighted, professionally produced porn content to be uploaded as well. So it was all kinds of illegal content all over the site.
So what happened a number of years ago? They had to delete a bunch of their videos, right? Can you explain what happened then?
Yes.
Did that have anything to do with you?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Yes. Yeah. So what happened was, after I made this discovery, I was horrified. I said, what am I going to do about this? I have to sound the alarm on this. I don't know what else to do besides post on social media. All I had was a Twitter account. I was an anti-trafficking activist who'd spent years trying to raise awareness. Only have a few thousand followers on social media, but I started the hashtag TraffickingHub because, per definition, anybody that's under the age of 18 or anybody that is used in a non-consensual sex act by force, fraud, or coercion. So if they're an adult and it's by force, fraud, or coercion, or if they're a child and this is a commercialized sex act, so it has to be done for something of value, then that's an act of trafficking per definition.
Oh.
So every child on Pornhub, every non-consensual video that's on Pornhub is actually an act of trafficking per definition. So that's why I said Pornhub is not, it's not Pornhub, it's Trafficking Hub. And I started that hashtag. It started to take, people started to share it. I wrote an op-ed about that in the Washington Examiner with the findings of these stories and the upload system. And that started to go viral. People called on me to start a petition, which I did. And that started to go viral. So today we have 2.3 million signatures from every country in the world on the petition to shut down Pornhub and hold its executives accountable. And people can still sign that today. It's at TraffickingHubPetition.com, and people are signing it every single day. Hundreds of media articles started to be written about this. And as this was all kind of spreading online, victims were seeing it. So victims started to come forward to me almost every day.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot to handle.
Whistleblowers from the company started to come forward to share the inner workings of the company. At one point, the former owner of Pornhub came forward to say he wanted to help, which was crazy. And all of this culminated at the end of 2020. Nick Kristof from the New York Times, he took notice of all that was going on. And he engaged in a 6-month investigation. I was connecting him with whistleblowers. I was connecting him with victims. And he released this kind of groundbreaking article called The Children of Pornhub. And it sent shockwaves around the world. He ended with the words, Pornhub is Jeffrey Epstein times 1,000. And we were calling out the credit card companies all year. I had been engaged in conversations with the VPs of Visa, the VPs of MasterCard, because we understood we have to hit them where it hurts if we want to actually stop this and hold them accountable. But they were resisting. And then Nick Kristof called Visa and MasterCard and Discover out in his article. He said, why are the credit card companies processing and benefiting from child trafficking and rape on Pornhub? And the pressure was on. And finally, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover all cut ties, joined PayPal, cutting ties with the site, leaving them with only cryptocurrency and bank wires as payment options.
Okay.
And then in a panic, the owners of the site did the unthinkable for a free porn tube site because they depend on massive amounts of content to drive traffic. They took down 80% of the entire website overnight, over 10 million videos, over 30 million images in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history. They lost all major advertisers. The CEO and the COO were forced to resign. The secret majority shareholder was found and exposed. He was hiding himself from the public. They were criminally charged by the US government for intentionally profiting from trafficking. And today they're being sued by hundreds of victims in 25 lawsuits, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. And the site was sold as a distressed asset. And today, they've actually had to take down 91% of the entire website is gone. So they've had to, and we're not done yet because the call to action at the beginning was shut down Pornhub and hold its executives accountable. And we still have yet to see justice fully served, but we've come a long way. So this is kind of what happened.
That's insane. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of information. 91% of it.
Yes. They went from 56 million pieces of content in 2020 to 5.2 million pieces of content today. And those millions of pieces that are on the site today are still mostly unverified content, meaning they didn't verify the age and consent of the individuals that are in those videos. They only verified the uploader. So like they didn't used to even
so
do
that's
that.
not, yeah.
They didn't even used to verify the uploader. But now they say, oh, well, we verified the uploader. But that doesn't actually solve the problem. There was a verified uploader named Rocky Shea Franklin in Alabama, and he drugged and overpowered and raped a 12-year-old boy. And he uploaded 23 of those rape videos to Pornhub with titles that indicated clearly that this was the abuse of a child. And police reached out multiple times demanding they come down. 7 months went by. They were ignored. The child's rape stayed up, getting hundreds of thousands of monetized views. And he was in a profit-sharing relationship with Pornhub. And today he's arrested. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison, but he was a verified uploader. So clearly that doesn't actually solve the problem, just to verify the person uploading.
So how are people making money off of this? Is it through advertising on Pornhub?
So most of it is, so the site makes most of its money by selling 4.6 billion ad impressions on Pornhub every single day.
Okay.
So they monetize free porn. So free porn's not free, right? It is monetized, heavily monetized. But some of the people, so it was about 20% of the people that were uploading were doing it in a pay to download situation with Pornhub, where they would put the content behind a paywall and you would have to pay to download those videos. And that's Rocky Shea Franklin was in that situation. A number of the victims, like the 15-year-old girl from Florida that I described, she was one of those that was paid to download her rape video on Pornhub. But most people are uploading and they don't get money for it. It's for views, clicks, shares, kind of like social currency. The same reason why people are uploading to Facebook or Instagram is why they're uploading.
Oh, this is so awful. I guess the people uploading behind a paywall were thinking, well, anyone who's going to download and pay for this content, they're not going to be the ones that get me in trouble. I guess my question is, this was all illegal, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And people were aware they were doing illegal things, obviously.
Yes. Well, most of them could do it anonymously because they could even use a VPN so that you couldn't even detect the IP address. And even in cases where Pornhub knew that they would actually have to take down a video of a child, or a victim would reach out, beg them to take down that content. You know, there's stories like Serena Fleitas from Bakersfield, California. You know, she's was the feature of that New York Times piece by Nick Kristof, and today she's suing Pornhub, its owners. She's suing Visa. She's suing the hedge funds that funded the parent company of MindGeek, or Pornhub, called MindGeek. But she was a young teen, so she was a straight A student. She had never kissed a boy before, and her boyfriend, or the boy that she had a crush on, coerced her into sending nude images and videos of herself to him, which she did, and then he shared them with classmates. They started to get uploaded again and again to Pornhub, getting millions of views. She would beg for those videos to come down, and then she would be hassled if they even answered at all. So they would say, prove that you're a child in the video, prove that you're a victim in the video. Obviously, you shouldn't have to prove anything to have the video uploaded to Pornhub. And she testified before Canadian Parliament about all of this. And if she did get it down, it would just get re-uploaded again and again and again. And victims call it the immortalization of their trauma. So they say it's like one thing to be abused, but then it's uploaded and then it's distributed online in perpetuity. So they know that even after they're dead, like this will go on and on and on. And so this sent her into a spiral of despair. She dropped out of school. She's being bullied. She got addicted to drugs to numb the pain. She tried to kill herself multiple times because of, just actually victims of this kind of abuse have a 50% suicidal ideation rate. Yeah. And then she ended up homeless, living out of her car.
Oh my gosh.
And so, that was her trajectory. But she was, one of so many of these teens that were being abused for profit on Pornhub, and Pornhub knew that this was happening, but they actually hid that from authorities for 13 years. So, what the leading heads of the child protection agencies in Canada and the United States testified that for 13 years until all of this happened, they were actually hiding the child abuse from authorities. So they weren't reporting it, even though we have mandatory reporting laws. So, that's so horrifying, because imagine how many kids could have actually been rescued and saved if they weren't trying to hide the child abuse from authorities for all these years. But they were.
Wasn't one of the owners' houses burned down? This is a company. So MindGeek, is that a company out of Montreal in Canada?
Yes. They're headquartered there.
Yeah.
Yes. It is a Canadian. Everybody thinks of it as a Canadian company. Based in Montreal, they had 1,800 employees in Montreal.
Wow.
They only hired one person out of 1,800 employees to be reviewing videos flagged by users as terms of service violations, including rape and trafficking. One person.
Well,
5 days a week.
If you're going to be evil, might as well be all like, don't spend money on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Out of those 1,800 employees, they only had 30 moderators, 10 per shift, reviewing thousands of videos. So they would review, if they reviewed less than 700 videos per 8-hour shift, they were reprimanded. They normally had to watch 1,200 videos. Some of the more experienced moderators were flipping through up to 2,000 videos per 8-hour shift on Pornhub. And they were just guessing. So they call it the underage guessing game, where they're just playing Russian roulette with people's lives. They're trying to guess who's 16 and who's 18, what's rough sex and what's rape. They nobody could tell. So they were literally just guessing, and they guess wrong all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But they were Canadian, but they're also international. So, they were based in Luxembourg for tax purposes. They had offices in Romania and Cyprus and Texas and LA and the UK. They're this multinational corporation.
So why didn't they get shut down? How much are they worth? How much are they worth now?
Well, they were a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So in order to understand Pornhub, you really have to understand the parent company. So Pornhub was owned by a parent company called MindGeek. And with a $362 million loan, they had essentially rolled up the porn industry under one company. So they owned, Playboy Digital. They owned,
What?
Yeah. Most of the world's most popular subscription sites, pay sites, brands, tube sites. So it wasn't just Pornhub. It was like Pornhub and its sister sites. So Pornhub, YouPorn, TubeBait, ExtremeTube, GayTube, XTube. I could go on and on. They owned all of that. So they owned, it's estimated about 80% of the world's most popular porn sites and brands were under this one company. And so they were worth multiple billions of dollars. However, it was just sold for $400 million as a distressed asset. Still a lot, but it was not what they were for sure, because they've lost advertisers, credit card companies. They've definitely faced a reckoning so far. But
wow,
yeah.
Well, good for you.
Well, it wasn't.
Sounds like a stressful job.
Yeah, it was a lot of people, the lawyers, the victims, the attorneys. It was really amazing to see. And even today, still see, we had 600 organizations come together, hundreds of survivors.
Wow.
It was really, it was truly a movement. It is truly a movement. So many, 70 members of parliament in Canada came together from 8 parties. When do you see people from 8 parties come together, right? On something.
Hopefully on something like this, they could align in their views.
Yeah. So that, it's been a lot of people coming together, and I'm just honored to have a part in leading what's happened.
That's horrifying. Ew. Oh, I knew about you. I knew what you do. I know you were on my dad's podcast. I know about this, but hearing about it, it's so disturbing. What kind of person's what do you do as a job? Oh, I own these companies. Who are these people?
Well, I tried to profile.
Oh my gosh.
I had dozens of hours of interviews with family insiders, with company insiders who actually knew the owners well. And they had hidden themselves from the public for so many years. They used fake names. They used fake profiles. They tried to throw people off by they hired, SEO companies to put fake pictures and fake profiles online. the secret majority shareholder of the company. Nobody knew who he was for years. Like nobody knew he even existed. He was completely hidden, and now finally exposed. And he's personally being sued by dozens of victims for what's happened.
And he's being sued because he was fully aware of what was going on. I mean, if he hid himself, then he knew something.
The way that the victims are suing is under our statutes in the United States that say, there's knowingly benefiting from a trafficking venture is the law. So, if a company, or even if an enabler, like the credit card companies, for example, like under our trafficking statutes, you can't knowingly benefit from a trafficking venture. So whether it's the owners, the company, enablers, like they can be held accountable under our laws, both criminally and civilly, for knowingly or should have known. So it's like you knew.
Oh, okay. Should have known
or
too.
You should have known that this was happening. And then victims have the ability to actually try to hold them accountable, which they're doing right now. And they're making a lot of progress. They're making amazing progress in the courts, which is really encouraging to see.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Ugh. So you said people had set up, like, I didn't realize that people were being kidnapped and trafficked just to make money on Pornhub. I didn't realize kidnapping was taking place too. I mean, like, rape is already bad enough in like coercive relationships and that kind of thing. That's kind of when I heard about you, I was thinking, okay, so a lot of this is like revenge porn or
it is that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But people were also being full on kidnapped children.
There was a story just last Friday of a 21-year-old man in North Ireland named Stephen McIlvany, and he tricked, coerced, blackmailed 3 young boys to come to his house, and he actually overpowered them and physically brutalized them where they had brain bleeding from the attacks. And he raped these 3 boys, and he uploaded videos of their rapes to Pornhub, and he got sentenced last Friday to 23 years in prison for doing that. And I mean, horrifying.
How many people, so you talked about the number of videos and everything and the content that was removed. How many people were uploading like trafficking? What do you call them? Videos?
Yeah. Or illegal content, non-consensual content. I mean, we don't have like a precise number, but the site, like when I say the word infested, I actually mean infested. I mean, you could find, when all this was really going down, they've tried now, they've gotten in huge trouble, right? So they've tried to, now they have a government monitor over the site, and they've had such huge repercussions that they're trying to clean this stuff up now. Too late. They don't get any credit for that. But like you could search drugged, drunk, coerced, rape in different kinds of languages, CP, all of these things clearly indicating abuse. And you would go on what I call like the black hole, the hellhole of rape on the site, where it would be the most obvious, from the most obvious to, just the non-consensually uploaded stuff that, somebody could actually videotape it with a partner consensually and upload it non-consensually. But they even had like unconscious people, women on the site, where you would have like a masked rapist, and he would actually be lifting the eyelids of the victims and touching their eyeballs to prove that they're unconscious in the videos. And these would be on Pornhub for years.
So bad. What?
Yeah, for years they would be on Pornhub. And then the algorithm will spring into action because they want to serve up. If they think somebody watch that, well, they're going to just serve more and more and more of that same kind of content, and it wasn't just like adults unconscious rape. It was, they had so many teens on the site that were being brutally abused, homeless teens, crying teens. Like these were some of the tags and titles. And they were actually, we have legal discovery and court documents now showing they knew down to the dollar how much they were making on these tags, titles, categories, where they understood that they were infested with illegal content. So like the teens, the very young, all of that. And like recently, court documents showed that the executives refused to even take words off the site like childhood, minor, young girl, things like that. So, I mean, the complicity of when I say like shut down Pornhub, it's not something that I've said like just to be, extreme about it or just to, be inciting people. It's because the level of complicity that we've seen and the way that this has been done since 2007 to literally destroy the lives of so many victims, like the only justifiable response to that is shut down Pornhub and put its executives in prison. And the reason why that's important is because victims need that for healing. They need to...
Well, even the people working there going through videos.
Yeah.
Like honestly though, like how warped do you have to be like, yeah, I'm a content moderator going through 2000, like, you're not seeing the world clearly if you're like, yeah, that seems okay. I don't know.
Oh,
like at least the executives.
Yeah. They were making the decisions. They were saying, listen, the role of the content moderators, like what they said was, we understood that our job was not to limit content that was going up on the site, but it was to let as much content go through as possible, because the free porn tube sites, like they rely on massive amounts of content to get those Google search results to drive that content. So they didn't really care what was in the videos. They just wanted videos. They just wanted a lot of videos. So they had no incentive to take those videos down. But yeah, I mean, like some of the moderators, they just saw the headlines. Like they came forward, they showed schedules, documents. One of the moderators today, I would consider him a friend. I've spent so much time with him understanding how all of this worked. And he really had a hard time with this because he was sexually abused as a child, and he gave permission for me to share that. But that was one of the reasons why when he saw this, he just said, I can't keep quiet. I have to come forward and help expose what's going on. But he was part of the machine, right? He was part of all of this.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you think there are other sites? I mean, Pornhub was the big one. That's the one everybody has heard about. But are there other sites that have the same kind of issue? Like, does OnlyFans have a similar issue? Do you know anything about that?
So for sure, the free porn tube site. So there's Pornhub and its parent company MindGeek, but then they have biggest competitors. And so one of them would be X Hamster, owned by Hammy Media. They're a free porn tube site. They operate the same way, where they were not verifying age and consent to upload. You have X Videos and XNXX, owned by WGCZ, and they similarly were not verifying age and consent. So Nick Kristoff, a few months after he did the expose on Pornhub, he actually did one on X Videos, because some of the same victims that were being exploited on Pornhub were also being exploited on X Videos. So then the question is, okay, clearly, Pornhub actually paved the way for all of this. They kind of set the standard for the industry to do this. But we have a bigger problem than just holding Pornhub accountable. And that's why the solution at scale to this problem is age and consent verification for every single person in every video. And it has to be third party. Yeah, like duh, right? Yeah. Like how is that not already the standard? Like, that is the crazy part of all of this, is that it's been a free for all for them to just, for years, be able to just have crime all over these mainstream sites, not the dark web, right? This is mainstream porn that everybody goes to. So solution at scale, third party, because I would never want anyone to ever give their ID to Pornhub or any of these sites. So third party age and consent verification for every single person in every single video on a user generated porn site. And not just governments that have to implement that, because they do, but credit card companies. They should have to implement that to solve this problem at scale, because they're international, because these companies are highly motivated by profit. So if Visa says, we won't do business with any user-generated porn site that doesn't verify age and consent, then immediately they will all comply. So,
okay, I mean, that all seems more than reasonable. So how come, like, anyone who's a survivor of this or who is trying to be a whistleblower, why isn't it as simple as sending Like, why can't they just take content down? Why can't you just send a cease and desist and say, hey, here's the video. This is me, or this is somebody I know. And then why doesn't the law get involved and take it down? Why is it taking so long? And
there's actually a law that's trying to be passed right now called Take It Down Act. That does, address this of, within a certain amount of hours, 24 hours or 48 hours, can't remember what it was. If a victim reports a video, it should be able to be taken down. There's various laws being proposed to that end.
But I guess this is just so new that there wasn't a legal infrastructure for online content. I don't get it.
There is. And by the way, like there are laws that we have that are being used currently to address this issue, but we can improve them for sure. But I mean, it's illegal to distribute child sexual abuse material.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's illegal to distribute it, to possess it, to all of that. Like that's already illegal. And victims are suing and trying to hold the company accountable for that. Already, knowingly benefiting from a trafficking venture. But we also have USC 2257, which is a law in the US where, it started with the brick and mortar porn companies in Porn Valley and the studio produced porn, where they understood, everybody with a brain understands, if you don't verify age and consent in porn, it's going to get awash with illegal content. So they adopted this law, and it's a crime in the United States not to verify ID for those who are in studio produced porn. It applies to Pornhub, although they thought that it didn't because they were actually transferring content too. So they had a download button on every single video so that millions of people had the opportunity, not just like YouTube when you can save it for later, but actually possess it and then upload it again and again. But that just, our laws have to evolve with the internet, that so that it's understood that's not just for studio brick and mortar porn companies that have to comply, but if you're an internet porn company, you have to comply as well. So we need to see that happen for sure here.
Yeah. I can't believe that hasn't. You always assume, I feel like as a kid, that everything's kind of taken care of in the world. I mean, depending on your childhood, but like things are organized, and then you grow up and you're like, no one has any idea what they're doing, and nothing is organized at the layer you need it organized at. Like you would assume, verification. Okay. Easy.
Yep.
Or like laws to protect you.
People are shocked that that's not, just across the board the case with all online porn, but it hasn't been that way. But to the take it down point, really 1 minute is too long. On one of these porn sites, 170 million visits per day on Pornhub. When a video is uploaded, even if they took off the download button, which they had to do, they still could screen record. I mean, there's a million different ways you can save that video.
You can also stop screen recording. You can implement that as the company that you can't screen record. Like you can't screen record on Netflix and all this.
Yes, they can implement that. They're not doing that. But they should. They should be forced to. That's a really good point. That should be part of the law to force them not to be able to screen record on these sites because
obviously
1 minute's too long. Because once it's uploaded, and that's the immortalization of the trauma that victims are so, just traumatized by, because they could try to heal, they could go to therapy, they could try to get beyond that rape. But when that video keeps coming up again and again and again across the internet, it's this, I call it a sadistic game of whack-a-mole, where it's like that scab that just gets peeled off and it can never heal. And so that's why
obviously
we have to prevent it from ever being uploaded in the first place, right? And then, yes, they should take it down after it's been identified. But if we could prevent it from ever getting on those sites, like that's the biggest win in this situation.
Yeah,
for
crazy.
That to happen. Yeah.
So did you? Wild. It's shocking how evil people can be. It still shocks me. It's gross. You said you started out before you got into this like Pornhub debacle in trafficking, like researching trafficking, trying to put an end to trafficking. So how did that happen? What's that beginning like?
Yeah, well, I credit my dad. My dad passed away in 2014, but he was a huge influence on me from when I was very young. And he was somebody that had a heart for justice issues, for human rights issues. He grew up in the Middle East amid war, civil war in Amman, Jordan. And then he came to the U.S. to become a surgeon. So he was a general surgeon. and he dedicated his own life to saving lives. Like, he could have done a lot of different things in his medical profession, but he wanted to really make a difference. So, you know, even though he had to be up at all hours of the day and night, running to the emergency room, he was actually saving people's lives. And he was sacrificing to do that. And he wanted to do that. And as we were growing up, like, you know, we had moments where we bonded most talking about issues of human rights, war and genocide and slavery, and watching documentaries together and watching the news and all of that. So from a very young age, I kind of had that instilled in me from my dad. And then one day in 2000, I think it was in 2005, he was watching a documentary, and it was about child sex trafficking in Calcutta, India. And he called me into the living room to watch that with him. And I'd never seen anything about trafficking or modern slavery before. So it was all very shocking to me to see that. And it was that moment that kind of inspired me to research more and then get involved in the fight against sex trafficking specifically. And so I'd been doing that for years, really focusing on prevention. Like, my heart is for prevention, implementing laws, raising awareness. You know, it's important to rescue people or to help them escape or help them, support them in their journey out of those situations of exploitation. You know, and I'm so grateful for the people that do that in this field. But I always gravitated towards, you know, how could we prevent this from happening in the first place? And so, you know, that was my focus, was on laws to prevent trafficking for many years. That was what I focused on.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sounds like you had a good dad.
I had a good dad. You have a good dad.
I have a good dad.
I've told you before, I appreciate just seeing your public relationship that you have with your dad and the way that you support each other. And it's really beautiful.
I think it's cool to be able to teach kids that they can do something good beyond, you know, themselves, and not like activism in a negative way, but like you basically, I think I got taught from the time I was a child that, like, you have to do everything right and always make the right decision that's like aiming upward, because people can go dark. I didn't realize until I got older how evil people can be. And like, this is on another level of evil, but you can raise kids in a way that they're hopefully not naive and able to make the right decisions. Talking about prevention, do you have tips for parents or friends or anybody who's around people who might be in a situation where they're getting coerced or trafficked, and like what to look out for, how to avoid it? So I think one of the fears of having a kid too, and I'm not a very paranoid person, although I'm a little bit more paranoid now, to be honest, but is like, how do you warn kids to not fall prey to these people?
Yeah. And today it's not even
sending nudes today. It's like, I've got a 7-year-old, she's going to be a teenager. And it's like,
and that's the kind of stuff that also was ending up on Pornhub, is they call it self-generated CSAM. So self-generated child sexual abuse material that they could have sent to a boyfriend, right? And then it gets out of hand, it gets uploaded. Other ways that children are being preyed upon today, it's called sextortion. It's so common. And what happens is that young tweens and teens, or really anybody that has access to a device, and there's predators that are lurking, trying to connect with children, chat rooms or different apps, and they pretend to be another minor. So they pretend that, let's say it's a girl, right? So like a 15-year-old girl, and then so he'll pretend to be a 15-year-old boy. And then they'll start talking, and then, there'll be some grooming going on, and then finally, send me a nude image of yourself. And then it's so common, they do it. So Thorne actually released a report that said that I think it was 1 in 7 children who was, I think it was between 9 and 12, had sent a nude image of themselves.
9 and 12?
Between 9 and 12, 1 in 7. And this was, they had done a survey of, I think it was over 1,000 kids. So it's very common today for that to happen, right? And so then they'll say, send me a video. Then what they do is they say, okay, they kind of reveal who they really are. They say, well, we have the name, we know who your parents are, we know your teachers, your classmates, and if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we're going to send these images of you or these videos that you made. And the kids are terrified because they're so ashamed. and they'll do what this criminal tells them to do, whether it's to send more videos or to give them money. And then sometimes they're so desperate in that moment that they try to commit suicide. So really it's a life and death issue. But to your point of like, what do parents do? I think one of the most important things to do, besides just, gosh, in this day and age, it's so hard to protect your kids from the online world. It's so hard to be monitoring them all the time. Do your best, right? In that regard, but have a trusted relationship. Let your kid at least have one adult relationship, whether it's an auntie or a teacher or you, where it's like this shame-free zone, and they know that they could go and share anything. And if they were in an emergency situation like that, they know there is somebody that they can trust, that they can go right to for help without shame. And I think that is lifesaver for kids in this day and age.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I had that conversation actually with my daughter recently, which was, I've done like a parenting a little bit differently, I think, than how I was raised. Not that I'm complaining about how I was raised. I was like, I remember, and I was quite depressed and sick as a teenager, but I remember when I started to lie about going out or drinking or things, it was because it was like hammered into me to tell the truth, but I didn't really understand, I guess, on a spiritual level, why to do that. And I knew that if I said bad things I did, I'd get grounded or punished. And so I was like, wow, I'm in this weird predicament of like, I'm doing some things I shouldn't do, but I don't have anybody to talk to necessarily without getting in trouble. So I was like, I agree with raising a kid being like, look, I'm going to instruct you in the right way to go, but I'll never be mad at you for telling me the truth. Like, I'll never be mad at you for telling me the truth. Even if you feel shame and guilt and it's something bad you've done, tell me the truth and I'll help you figure it out, and I won't be mad at you.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard balance, right?
It's hard because you have to do discipline.
Like, go ahead and do whatever you want. It's okay. But then there's I relate to that because my dad was, I understood that he really wanted us to, not do all those things that I ended up doing.
Yeah.
And he didn't know. He had no idea. I was going out, drinking, drugs, all the things that I did.
I know. How do you stop that? Or it just depends if you have a wild card as a child.
I don't know.
I'm going the route where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be mad at you. It's not like I don't discipline her either when she needs it. I was like, as a teenager, what would I do to a teenager that was like, yeah, I've been, drinking at my friend's house with people I don't know. Like, definitely don't do that. But
I agree. It's better though that if they could share it with you.
At least tell you so you know.
Feel like they're not going to be punished for sharing the truth, and that they can trust you to guide them out of it. I mean, I think that's the key. I didn't really have that either growing up because I didn't want to share it because I knew I was going to get in trouble.
I think that's totally normal. Yeah. And you should, like, it's not like you should be encouraged to do those things and you shouldn't get into trouble at all. But I was like, maybe if me as a teenager, maybe if I felt like I wasn't going to get punished, there was still part of my underdeveloped brain that was like, this is bad for me and I shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, I don't even know if it'll work, but I was like, maybe if I didn't get in trouble, then someone could talk to me and be like, these are the reasons it's unsafe for you. Like, at least that, like, this is why it's not safe for you. Other than the fact it's not good for you, this is why it isn't safe.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have clicked. It's just hard with like anybody young because they just these days, don't think about.
With the pornography exposure and the predators online and all of that, for sure, having that open line of communication, they call it shame-free zone, for you to be able to communicate with your kids about that. And because they do feel a lot of shame involved in, because kids are, when they, and also like the grooming aspect of being exposed to porn at a very young age these days is having a really detrimental effect on kids.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Do you have numbers around that? Like what age are kids generally? Because I know you'll go to school and then some kid will show it to you too.
Yes.
So what age are kids usually exposed to porn, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's now the stats, and they have lots of different stats, but 75% of kids by the time they're 15 are being exposed to online porn. I get contacted all the time by young men, especially, who say, I was 8. I was 9. I just got contacted a week ago by somebody who said they were 6 when they got exposed to the free online porn sites like Pornhub and got, they call it addicted, like compulsive porn use starting when they were children, like 6, 8, 9, 10 years old. And that continues. And it's not Playboy. Like this is not, the centerfold of old. Like this is hardcore, this is violent, but it's also criminal. Like what we know is things that I would never wish upon my worst enemy. These kids could be witnessing as an 8-year-old child to develop their sexual template, to have this as their sex education. They could be watching.
Oh yeah, that's brutal.
The real rape or coercion, all of these different things that are happening on the free porn tube sites. And it's not just a free for all on the side of uploading. Like they're not verifying the ages of those who are accessing the free porn sites either. So
oh my gosh, that's another level. Yeah.
Yeah. So like kids are being exploited in front of the screen and they're being exploited in back of the screen. It is a form of secondhand sexual abuse for children to have, to witness this content. Even just, whatever, if you would call it the vanilla pornography, like kids should not, they're not ready to watch that. But that's not all that this is. It's, there's so much violence. There's so much, incest themes, teen is one of the most popular categories on these sites. Incest is so common, incest themes. And a lot of this is, people who are consenting adults who are over 18, and they're just pretending to do these things. But a lot of this is actually real, right? We know that for a fact that a lot of this is actually real abuse of children and others. And so there's a movement in the United States right now, I'm grateful for it, to enact age verification for those who are viewing these free user-generated porn sites. So 17 states have adopted
These are things that I just assumed kind of existed in this realm. Already.
They do not. So there wasn't even an "Are you 18?" click-through button that any 5-year-old could just click
like
through.
A button.
Like no, there wasn't even that. Like now, I think on mobile devices they finally have, but just like "Are you 18?" and then you just click it. There's no actual verification that that's true. But in these states across the U.S. where they're enacting this law, Pornhub is shutting itself down in protest of verifying that children are not accessing their site.
Ew.
Because they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay the third party to have to verify those users because their business model depends on unlimited amounts of content unlimited amounts of traffic to be to go to those sites without any friction. So they can sell those billions of advertising impressions every day. So they don't want to do it.
Like pure evil, what people who are anti-capitalist think evil corporations are like.
Oh,
just that pure evil capitalist
this
corporation.
100%. Profit over the protection of children every single time. And they've gone so far as to sue the state of Texas. So Texas enacted age verification to protect the children of Texas from exposure to the Pornhub crime scene and the other free user-generated porn sites like it. And Pornhub and its partners sued the state of Texas. They lost, they appealed. Now it's at the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court currently is trying to decide whether states have the right to implement age verification for these sites. So we're going to know by June, we're going to know what's going to happen with that.
I don't understand what the other side of the argument is.
The other side, well, for the porn sites, they don't want to pay for it. It's expensive, right?
But I mean, for the Supreme Court
so they're doing this all under the facade of free speech,
of course.
under privacy. So they're saying it's so ridiculous that they're saying
the
this.
angle they're going.
They're saying we care about privacy. We do not want our users' privacy. At the same time, they have a class action lawsuit against them for exploiting user data. They don't, having non-consensual content all over the site, right? I mean. But yet they have the, they go out and say, this is about privacy. We don't want people to have to hand over their ID. But they don't have to hand over their ID to Pornhub. They don't actually have to hand their ID over to anybody. they have now technology where they can do in 1 second a facial scan using pixels and using numbers and pixels, AI that's trained on thousands, if not millions of faces. And in 1 second, they can determine with almost, let's say 99% accuracy, how old that person is that is trying to access the site. And they don't store that picture. They just verify it. And then they can create a token that could be used on multiple different porn sites. So it's actually based on a misconception that's, now if you're under 21, the accuracy goes down, right? So if you're under 21, you would probably need to couple that with an ID for that third party to verify. But Which
seems like a good idea.
Right.
If you're looking at a porn site.
If you're over 21, it takes 1 second to look at that face and then determine whether you're an adult. And then it's easy.
Wow.
But they want to pretend it's hard. They want to scare people to think that they're going to have to hand their ID to Pornhub.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering what their angle was.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. Okay. You talked a little bit about, or let's get into this aspect, the more like psychological repercussions of watching porn. Do you know what happens to a developing brain or even an adult brain if you get addicted to porn? Is the porn addiction thing real?
So there's so much debate around this. Some people want to kind of split hairs over whether they can call it addiction or whether they have to call it, compulsive or sexual compulsivity. And, there's people all over the world who are, by the thousands, young men in forums saying that they can't control their porn use and that they want help, right? And so whether you call it addiction or sexual compulsion, I think these people do need help if they can't control that and it's having a detrimental effect on their life. I'm not an expert in the brain science of porn addiction. So that's, I focus on, the actual criminal content that's being distributed and all of that. But there is a really good book called Your Brain on Porn. There's an organization called the Reward Foundation. There's lots of neuroscientists who are looking at this and trying to understand the implications of it. But, there's people who are saying it's causing depression, anxiety. They're also, saying that they have an issue where, they may start out with one type of porn and they never imagined that they would kind of go down this rabbit hole.
I've heard this, yeah.
Where I think it's called habituation or desensitization, where they don't just need more porn to get that same dopamine hit, where they need different kinds of porn. So they need more novelty. And then they end up going, more violent, maybe younger. And they end up even sometimes as consumers of CSAM, child sexual abuse material, when they didn't actually start out as a pedophile. Like they then went down that road because of, the teen categories and then kind of going more and more extreme, younger, more violent, things like that, which is super detrimental.
I used to think that sounded crazy. Not that I was ever an expert in this at all. But I was like, there's no way like a porn addiction's an addiction, like a drug addiction. Like that doesn't make sense. But then over the last, I guess it'd be maybe 3 or 4 years, once I found out about Pornhub and all this, because I knew a little bit about it, I've been talking to more and more people my age, but like men mostly, who were like, yeah, I had a hard time dropping it. And yeah, I was desensitized. And yeah, I did make relationships harder, all this, which I don't know enough about the stats. I'll have to have somebody on the podcast to talk about it, because I was like, I don't think I've heard from as many women that it does that to women.
Yeah.
But I can understand if you're getting this dopamine spike constantly, that it could be addictive.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people who are saying that. And I mean, just anecdotally, I get messages all the time from especially young men, but also women who say that they cannot stop. They want to stop and they can't. And sometimes they're messaging me because they're saying, well, finally, for the first time, I feel like maybe I have the ammunition, knowing that there's a victim on the other side of the screen to stop me from doing what I don't want to do. And thank you for that. Like I needed that ammunition to give me the fortitude to actually stop. But they're telling me all the time, like, I want to, and I can't. And so if you want to do something and you can't, and you feel like it's bad for you, whatever we call it, like, let them get help. And I think one of the horrible things is that there are people out there that are trying to give people help. And they're being attacked all the time. They're being, it's hard. It's really hard because there's so much financial interest from the porn industry to make sure that, this doesn't seem like it could be a problem for people.
Yeah. And that's probably, I came from, I don't know what your background is, but like growing up in Toronto, super liberal. And so my view until more recently was like, kind of control yourself. It's fine. Let people do whatever they want. I still kind of, I don't even know what I think right now. I'm going to have to sit on that and think about it. But a vanilla example, I suppose, would be I stopped watching horror movies. I was obsessed with horror movies as a kid. And this is, like I said, a vanilla example. But I got completely desensitized to horror movies. And I was like, I got to a point, I think it was probably after I had a baby, where I was like, I don't really want to see that anymore. Or it was after I stopped taking antidepressants, probably. I was like, I don't want to watch horror movies anymore. And I stopped. And the first time I saw a horror movie, which was like 4 years after I stopped watching them, I was like, oh my gosh, blood, like gore. This is crazy. And so I think you can probably desensitize yourself as a human to content. Because when you stop watching certain content, it's shocking. And I can see that easily happening.
Well, that's the neuroplasticity. Because just like, the brain pathways, they can connect in certain ways, right? It's kind of like, it's like plastic, right? It's bendable, but it goes both ways. So if you make those negative pathways or the desensitization and all of that stuff that happens, habituation, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have read enough about this to understand that Dr. Donald Hilton, he's actually a brain surgeon, and he's been investigating porn addiction for a long time. And he talks about neuroplasticity, but he says, if you actually stop, right, then you can actually retrain your brain pathways to, undo the damage that has been done. So that's really encouraging, I think, to a lot of people to know that, so probably when you stopped watching the horror movies for a long time, and then when you saw them again, it was shocking to you because you had kind of maybe undone some of that habituation and desensitization in your brain.
I was surprised because I used to watch them with absolutely no like emotional response, really. Now I was on antidepressants, so it's hard to say like what that was doing as well. But I was surprised the first time I saw the beginning of because I didn't watch it. I was like, nope, that's too much for me. So I thought, I'm sure it's easy to desensitize yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, and that does happen. And I think there was just a research paper out of the University of New South Wales. I just read Dr. Michael Salter. So he investigates child sexual abuse material. He's a professor and he puts out studies. And what it was summarizing what they had looked at, and they saw that there is some connections between people who are daily porn consumers, who have a hypersexuality, that are viewing these kinds of categories like teen, like incest, like the very violent content, and actual they're showing a correlation between that and people acting out upon actual children and actually consuming real child sexual abuse material. So like there is a concern here for people who are viewing, especially these problematic kinds of pornographic content. Definitely.
Yikes.
Yeah. Not that everybody does it.
No.
There's people who can watch that content and never act out. Right. But there's also a concern that it can lead certain people down that path. Act out.
That makes sense. You have to be careful with your brain. It's a very plastic entity, like you said. Yeah. Laila, where can people find you online? Obviously, they can check out your book.
Yeah. So takedownbook.com, all proceeds, author royalty proceeds from the sale of the book go to the Justice Defense Fund to help victims in their pursuit of justice. Wow. And to implement these preventative policies. People can sign the petition. So we want more people to sign the petition, TraffickingHubPetition.com. And then they can follow me on social media. I'm posting about this all the time. I am not going to stop until we accomplish the goals of this movement, to see justice fully served. So they can follow me at Laila Mickelwait online.
Wow. Okay. I will link all those links below in the description for anybody listening or watching. Good for you. Thank you so much for coming out here. That is quite a monster to try and take on, but good for you. That needs to go.
Well, thank you for sharing this and using your platform to shine a light on it. And I feel like these conversations are so crucial because still so many people have no idea that this ever happened. That's a problem. So this is all part of it. So thank you for doing this.